Well, so thanks for coming and learning about Lightning Data Service. It's one of what we believe one of the most amazing things about Lightning, and we're biased because I invented it and Carolyn develops it. So you got that going for you. So I'm Marcus Torres. I am a Senior Director of Product on the Lightning platform. And Carolyn, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Grable. I am a lead engineer on the Lightning Data Service team.
Awesome. Now, who's ever been to a Salesforce event before? Sweet. A lot of people, I imagine that. So you will know what this slide is. Can anyone say it by, like, literally close your eyes and say verbatim? Because that would be impressive. Unlike Dreamforce, we don't have temporary tattoos for you to have that says this, but as you know, forward-looking statements, you make purchase decisions based on current functionality and nothing future functionality, in which we will be talking about some of that today. So as far as what we are going to discuss today, we have custom component considerations. Just what are some of the things that you guys think about when you go to create custom components, and how does that relate to Lightning Data Service, right? What is Lightning Data Service? And we're at a dev event, okay? No more marketing slides. Carolyn's going to run you through a bunch of code, and then I'm going to finish it off with the roadmap. So if you have built a custom component before, or you have been to the component booth, where I see some of you from earlier, where I was hosting that, there's a lot of things to consider with doing a custom component. Doesn't mean that's a bad thing, but there's a lot of good things you want to take into consideration as you're building these custom components. Everything from the bundle to SLDS to events and overrides and all these wonderful things. But if you look at all of the things that are around data, all of those things like SOQL and Apex and field level security and record updates and notifications to other components when things change, you don't have to do that with the Lightning Data Service because it's awesome. All right? And so, you know, our job, and constantly what myself and other product owners think about, is how do we do things so you don't have to do them? And the best example of this for component development is field level security. Somebody posted like, hey, Salesforce, why don't you do field level security with your components? And then somebody tweeted exactly what that code is. And like tens of thousands of people have copied and pasted that code off Stack Exchange and put it in their component. So it's probably something we should do for you. So let's go over what a data flow looks like, right? In Lightning or in Lightning components without Lightning Data Service. So every single component keeps a copy of its own record data, right? So if you have component A, component B, component C, and they're all referencing the same record, and you think, oh, Marcus, that's not really that possible. It's absolutely possible. Just look at any one of our pages, any one of our record pages, and there's numerous components all composing that single page. And all of them reference different parts of that page. So the highlights panel asks for 4 fields. The detail panel asks for all fields. And if you happen to be a customer that have 500 fields on your record layout, you should probably get a consultant to talk to you later today. But the fact is all of these components ask for different pieces, but they all keep their own copy. And so they all essentially go and they say, hey, I need this from you, Salesforce. And the way that you do that is you write a client-side controller. That client-side controller, then you have to write Apex. And in your Apex, you have to write SOQL. And it just seems like a lot of steps. Now, how many of you know what a standard controller for Visualforce is? Sweet. Then you know what this is, because it is the standard controller for Lightning. It is all of the sweet sauce that comes with that, but in Lightning. So the benefits of it, it's no more Apex or no more SOQL for single records, for essentially pulling a single record. You get field level security and sharing built in. You have what we call declarative CRUD operations. Basically, the component itself has save, reload, delete, get new, or basically create a new record of this type, all kind of built into the component itself. So it's very simple. And Carolyn's going to walk you through that code because she's smarter than I am. And the other cool thing is instead of these components all keeping their own copy of the data, they all essentially have a pointer to a single shared instance. So it's a shared cache, okay? Which is cool, so that you don't have one component that says A and the other component that says B for the same field for the same record at the same time, which, if you have done this before or Lightning for a while, may have happened to you, right? So the other really cool thing is it auto-notifies on changes to that record. So because it's a pointer, we auto-send out that update. So components get refreshed for free. Don't worry if you're an ISV and you have some special case and then you tell me that you have to do something after it gets updated. We support that too, and Carolyn will walk you through that. And then, of course, really cool if you need something to work offline in Salesforce 1, you can actually wire up a component with Lightning Data Service, and it'll work offline because offline in Salesforce 1 is powered by Lightning Data Service. Cool. So this is what the data flow looks like in our new world. So each of them use Force. I forgot an extra D, so California public school education. So I forgot an extra D. So all of the components use Force record data. Those call into Lightning Data Service, and then Lightning Data Service goes back and forth to Salesforce. So nice and easy. As far as the status of it is beta. It's auto-enabled in all orgs, so feel free to build on it, package it, ship it. Custom objects are fully supported. Why is it not GA? Because if I could see some of my colleagues that own opportunities and leads and their feature teams, I could tell you they didn't do their job. And that was why it doesn't work for opportunities and leads, which obviously sucks. And that's why we don't make it GA in summer. So this is live, obviously, now. And formatted field values are accessible through this target record attribute, which Carolyn will now walk you through. So take it away, Carolyn.
Thank you, Marcus. Let's talk about code. I know that's why everyone's here, right? Does anyone here have any experience using the Force record preview component, which was Lightning Data Service when it was in developer preview? I see 2 hands. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you used our developer preview. I'm going to walk through usage of Force record data, which is the flagship component of Lightning Data Service. When I'm talking about Lightning Data Service, we're talking about the Force record data component. I'm going to talk about each of these attributes you're going to pass into them and what each of them does. First, in Aura ID, if you ever want to reference this component from JavaScript, you need to give it a name. That name is what you will get from your component to access methods on the Force record data component. Next is the record ID. You have to give us a record ID to tell us what to load, or else we can't load anything for you. I think that part's straightforward. Next, you need to tell us what fields you want us to load. Just the same as in SOQL, you can't run a SOQL query without saying select field name, field name, field name from some entity. You need to tell Lightning Data Service, these are the fields I want to load. And you can do that by specifying a hard-coded string list of fields, which is fine. Or you can give us a layout type, which could be either full layout, everything the admin defined in the page layout editor, or compact layout, which would be everything in the highlights panel at the top of pages in Lightning Experience. Or you can give both. And we'll give you the superset of both of those things. So if you need full layout with 1 or 2 more fields, you can totally do that. Next, we have target fields and target record. And these are a little bit tricky. And if you used Force record preview, this is a little bit different than before. And that's one of the reasons we have a new component for this. Both target fields and target record are going to be the place you access the data that we loaded for you. The difference is just the format. It has the same data in both, but we're formatting them a little bit differently. Target fields you want to use if you're just going to access this data just in markup. You just need the raw API field values. You don't need anything more complicated like display values. To target fields, you pass in an attribute that you define in your component. So here we've defined an attribute called field values type object. So once we've loaded that record, we'll stick it in that attribute, which is why it's a target attribute. Target record is the same data, just formatted a little differently. It's a little more JavaScript friendly. It's a more complicated JSON object with raw API values, with display values, with record type ID, things you get for free. That if you're writing a lot more JavaScript logic on top of that record, you'll probably want that information. Target error, same as target record. If there's a record that we load, we stick it in there. If we get an error trying to load that record, we'll stick it in target error, and then you can just pipe that into an error pop-up or a modal or whatever you want to do in your markup. And last, you need to give us a mode. The mode is either going to be view or edit. And that's going to control whether we can automatically re-render some of your data for you. And I'm going to talk about that a little more as I go into my examples. So, Marcus, can you help me out here? I'm not a PowerPoint person.
As product owners, that's all we do. It's true. Sweet.
And you said I was smarter than you. Clearly not.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. So I have 3 components to demo for you. And they are fairly simple little bites of Lightning Data Service, but I hope they give you an idea of some of the powerful things you can accomplish with them. And all 3 components have no Apex controller, which I'm very excited about. You can tell, right? The first component I'd like to demo for you is this account temperature component at the bottom right of my screen. And this is being powered by Lightning Data Service. It's reading data from this account's rating field. So as soon as anyone views this account, they know exactly what the rating is for it. And it's reading the data from Lightning Data Service with no Apex controller and no JavaScript controller. We were able to accomplish this just with markup. If I change the rating from hot to cold, it automatically re-renders, also without any JavaScript code.
And no handlers either.
And no what?
Handlers.
No handlers, nothing like that. This component implements the force has record ID interface. And every single component, I think, that I've ever written that uses Lightning Data Service implements the force has record ID interface. With this interface, we're going to get an attribute for free that has the ID of the record that we're looking at. I can take that attribute, the record ID attribute, and pipe that directly into my force record data component. So I don't even have to do any SOQL query or anything to get the ID of the field that I need. I can pipe that in directly. Just as I was saying before, we made an attribute for a record of type object. We passed that into our target fields parameter. So when Lightning Data Service has loaded the record, we'll stick it in the record object. And then we can use that record object in our markup. I've given it some fields. I said I'm also going to use full layout. I didn't really need to, but I could anyway. And since we're not making any edits here, we're using view mode. Since we're in view mode, if the record changes, which we showed you in the demo, a Lightning Data Service will automatically trigger a re-render for any markup referencing that data. So let's see what that looks like. We have some divs with classes that are being dynamically calculated based on the record value. So here we check if record rating is hot, use the icon hot CSS class. Else, if the record rating is warm, use the warm CSS class. And that's what's driving whether that banner is red or orange or blue. That gets automatically re-rendered if the data ever changes. And then we just pipe the rating value directly into the markup at the end to show the string hot, cold, warm in the component. Pretty slick. No JavaScript, nothing like that. Automatic re-rendering, shares the same data on the page. I think it's pretty cool. I'm going to show you my next component. I made a little custom object to demo this. This custom object represents a sale of some kind. I'm going to look at all my sales. All one of them. This sale object has a few fields, a discount field, a price field, expected commission, a commission percent. So I, as a broker, I'll get some commission on this sale. The use case here for the component discount scratchpad. Is that really visible? Yeah. The discount scratchpad component use case is I'm a salesperson, and I'm on the phone with my customer. And as I'm talking with them, I'm negotiating the price, and I'm negotiating the discount, and I'm negotiating the commission. And as I propose different values, I want to know how that's going to change what commission I end up with. So if I change the discount from $5,000 to $2,000 and click my compute discount button, my component calculated just on the client and just in JavaScript with math what my expected new commission value is going to be, way down there at the bottom. And if I'm happy with that, if my customer's happy with that, they say, awesome, I'm sold, let's make that sale. If I click apply discount, it updates the record to match. So let's look at the code for that. Like all components I ever write that use Lightning Data Service, it implements force has record ID. I use that to get the ID of the record that I'm currently looking at because I want to pre-populate my component with some of those values. I have to give it an Aura ID because I'm going to want to reference it in JavaScript this time because I'm going to want to save it. Saving has to happen from JavaScript. I'll ask for layout type full instead of specifying which individual fields I need. And this time I'm going to say edit mode. Since I'm in edit mode, if something else changes that record, I'm not going to get the automatic re-rendering that I got on the previous component. But as a developer, maybe I still want to handle it, right? Oh, the reason we don't do that is if you're in the middle of making some edits and something else changes, you don't want to have those edits immediately clobbered, right? We've all been in that experience where we've lost some data we were in the middle of editing. And we don't want to impose that on your users. But we know that you probably might still want to take some action when that data changes. So we will fire an event. We will fire a record updated event. So when you define your force record data component, you can say, when the record updated event fires, run this function. So this is reset discount form is a function in my controller. So when the record changes, that function will automatically be run. And then last, I set my target fields attribute so that once force record data has loaded the record, it will stick it in that attribute. So I can use the name v.record to reference that data in my markup. And I've done that here in a lightning input and 2 lightning selects. So that goes with my lightning input and 2 lightning selects, reading data from the record. I've wired the value of all 3 of those directly to the record, so that when the user makes changes in those input fields, that will automatically be reflected in my local copy of the record. Let's look at what happens when the record changes. I promised that when the record updated event is fired, it'll run the reset discount form function. So I'm going to look at that in my controller. Reset discount form gets event params because when record data fires this record updated event, we give you a little more information about what happened. We'll tell you which fields changed and the old value and the new value, but we'll also tell you what type of change it is. Is this a change because the record was loaded for the first time? Is this a change because somebody changed it? Is this a change because it was removed from the cache? We'll give you metadata about that. So in this case, as long as the change wasn't an initial load, I want my force record data, and I have this called this variable record service, which is referring to my force record data component because I found it with find. If the change type's not loaded, I'm going to call reload record. Reload record goes to the cache to get the new data, or to get the latest data in the cache. It looks like it should go to the server. It doesn't necessarily do that. But if you want to force it to go to the server, you can. You can pass in a parameter to skip the cache if you know that there is stale data there and you need to go to the server or anything like that. Checking that change type is not loaded in this context is very important, because otherwise you get into a situation where, oh, we've loaded the record, and now you call reload the record. We loaded the record, now you call reload the record. It's very easy to get into that infinite loop. I've done that before. I recommend not doing that. The last function I want to show you on this component is my save function. Here is what it is like to save a record with forced record data. My inputs are already wired up to my record, so I don't have to do anything other than call the save function. All the changes that the users made are already reflected in the record attribute. So all I have to do is find my forced record data component and then call the save record method on it. Save record takes a callback function. When that save is complete, we will invoke the callback function and pass in a save result object. And that save result object is going to tell you all you need to know about how that save went. It'll have a status to tell you if that save was a success or an error. If it was an error, it'll have attributes about what the error is, if there were page errors, if there were field errors, things like that. You get errors for your saves from this save result object. They don't come in target error. In this demo, I've done a little, hooray, we succeeded. In production, you probably want to do a little more sophisticated error handling. But for a demo, it's enough. The last component I'd like to show you, and I also have this one on my sale object, is near and dear to my heart, because this is a component that I wrote for a hackathon to show the power of Lightning Data Service. And it did pretty well in this hackathon, so I'm pretty proud of it. The problem that I'm trying to solve is one that maybe some of you in the room have hit before. Because in Lightning Experience, we don't support JavaScript buttons. Is anyone familiar with that issue? Or that difference in features? So the specific JavaScript button use case I wanted to solve was creating a new record pre-populated with default field values from the record that I'm looking at. You can do that with quick actions, but there are some limitations. One of the big limitations is that you have to create a separate layout for that quick action. And I've gotten the feedback from admins that they don't want to maintain different layouts for all the different quick actions versus the full layouts, especially if you have a lot of different profiles and a lot of different layouts. Also, having quick action layouts can be kind of a lot to maintain. So my goal here was to create a new record pre-populated with default field values from the record that I'm looking at, and use the full layout. I'd like to show you what this looks like in the app builder, because I was able to use the design file to give the admin a lot of control over what happens in this component. So not a lot hard-coded into the component itself. This component can be used on any different object with pre-populating with any different fields. I'm going to click on it so that I can see a design file. So the attributes that the admin gets to populate are on the left, doing all of this declaratively. The admin gets to say what entity do they want to create. They can define a string, a button label to stick on the button. And then they get to map which fields they want on the record that I'm looking at to be the value on the new record that I'm creating. In this case, I'm going to create an account, and I'm going to say the account's annual revenue is going to be pre-populated with the price of the sale that I'm currently looking at, since this is on the sale object. I realize that's not probably very sensical in actual business logic, but I write demos. I'm a developer. So to demo that button, actually clicking on it, I'm expecting the price value to be pre-populated in a new account using full layout. And there it is. So let's look at what that looks like in code. My component, once again, implements force has record ID. I have some attributes to store the record that is loaded. This is the only piece of UI on the page, this lightning button. One thing that I want to drive home is that including force record data on your component by itself doesn't render any UI. By itself, no UI. It'll just load data, which is a little different from most Lightning components. But once you have that data, you can include that data in your own UI. So here's the only piece of UI in my component. It's a button. I have one force record data that's basically doing the same thing as my account status component did. It's getting data from the record that we're currently looking at. And then instead of passing it to UI directly, I'm going to use it to make some calculations in my JavaScript controller. So when they click on that button, oh, actually, what I want to show you is that when the record is updated, even though I'm in view mode, I still want to run some code when this record changes. Because there's nothing to automatically re-render. It's just a button. So when this record changes, I run my handle record updated event function. When this runs and the change type is loaded or changed, as long as the change type is not removed, I have a helper function that goes through the design attributes that the admin defined to say, what entity are we going to create? What are the field values that they want? And then that goes through the loaded record and creates a map of the default field values and sticks it in this field value map attribute. And then at this point, this is a very powerful pivot point. If I were writing this for my org, this is where I would put logic to say, oh, if this is coming from a user with this particular profile, populate these other fields with this other value. Or if they're creating an account, also populate these fields with other hard-coded values. Things that you might have put into a JavaScript button can go here. Then when they actually click the button, all I'm doing is getting the create record event. This is a standard event. I'll set parameters for the entity that I want to create and pass in the default field value map. And then those default field values are automatically passed to the modal that pops up when I fire create record. That's the end of my demos. I've done all of this without any Apex controller, no SOQL, no enqueued actions. Lightning Data Service handled everything for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to jump back to one slide, which is the roadmap and where we're really going with Lightning Data Service. And so it is going to be GA in winter. So the teams, like the Opties and Leads teams that I'm a little upset about, they did their thing in the latest release, and that's confirmed. So in winter, it will be GA, and everything will work as far as that's concerned. Bulk support is really where we're going to go in the future. So it'll probably be a different component. So instead of force record data, probably be force record collection or something like this. So and that will allow you to essentially write SOQL or provide a list view ID, and it'll go and it'll fetch all that data for you. And if you look at a lot of the demos or the code throughout this conference, you'll see that almost everyone has moved for a single record to Lightning Data Service, but the times when they still use Apex is for lists of data. And so once we add bulk support, then it's just amazing for even lists. Lastly, object metadata support, because let's be honest, data is not enough. Our platform is all about metadata. We need to give you metadata as part of this service, so that's coming as well. And server-triggered updates. And what that really means is as somebody makes a change on a different client across the world to that record, instead of you having to get it refreshed by the Lightning Data Service based on it reloading, or you going back to the page, or wherever the case, or even if you're not on the page, we will stream those updates down to the client, and it's essentially just subscribe to that in a typical pub sub model. And that's it. So we have 1 minute for questions. So does anybody have a question?
Actually, yeah, I do.
All right.
Would there be a way to actually, like on your button, for instance, the one you created, because that's going to be a problem for me, have a user pick
Oh, a microphone is a great option. I think the question was in the button, is there a way to have the user pick a record type for it? Let's see. You could definitely do that with popping up a custom modal and then take the value out of whatever they pick out of that modal and then pass that through to the same create record event, I'm pretty sure. Thinking about the first thing I would try, that is the first thing I would try.
Okay.
So can we reference the child object or the grandchild object, like records, child records or grandchild records in the data service?
You can reference spanning fields. So where Carolyn showed you where you define the fields, you can span down to, but you're not going to get records, you're not going to get child records for that. But as Carolyn showed you, you can actually use force record data multiple times in the same component. So you could always, for example, use force record data to get your data initially, and then after you get that data back, right? You could then use force record data to get like an associated record based on the ID or whatever.
And there's a great blog post on the developer blog about it.
Greg might have written it. I'm just saying. That's Greg. He's a good guy. All right. Any more questions?
Yeah. So how is the caching different from the action.set storable in case of Lightning data service?
Great question, by the way. So what the storable actions only did one thing. It took your black box thing, and it just said, I'm just storing the whole thing. So if you changed anything, any aspect of kind of the signature of that component, that storable action was essentially invalid, right? And so with Lightning Data Service, what it's doing is it's centralizing the data all in a single cache, and it's essentially like you can introspect it. You know what it is. Like the other one was just like, oh, you gave me this thing, I cached it. If I ever see the exact request for the same thing, I'll give it back. Also, Lightning Data Service has refresh capabilities built into it. So there is timing. I think we have a 30-second it's kind of time to live. So this is good to know as you're doing development probably. Like if you call Lightning Data Service and we fetch the record, and then you have something else ask for that same record within 30 seconds, even if that should go to Salesforce, we don't do it. We just kind of kill it and we give you what we have on the client. Trust me, it's good enough. We've seen it. In the future, we're thinking about adding a capability for you to configure that, but you also can force a reload, like in, say, skip cache, right? As far as, but if you're seeing like a change or somebody made a change in that 30 seconds, it's not being reflected. That's probably why. But anytime you would go back to anything that asks for that data, again, after 30 seconds, it'll go and fetch the whole thing. It'll give you the cache version, but it'll refresh the other one automatically. Okay? Sorry, that was a long answer. Cool. Any other questions? Or no questions? Cool. Thanks, guys. Have a good Trailhead DX.